I'm Hank Shocklee, producer, uh, songwriter, film scorer. I've done film projects such as Juice, He Got Game, um, uh, American Gangster, Friday Night Lights, um, Jarhead. I've done created groups like Public Enemy, Slick Rick, did Belle Biv DeVoe, uh, produced for LL Cool J, Run DMC. Well, when we made the first records, you're talking about taking a turntable and a record and basically taking that record and taking a piece from that record and recording that onto tape. Um, uh, and the way we would align those things is pretty much by we would have like maybe a drum pattern, drum beat that was made on a drum machine, and then that would be kind of like our basic, timing reference. And at the time, the only sampler was available was for us, when the S900 was the big sampler that happened for us. But even prior to the S900, there was the Mirage and Sonic Mirage keyboard, and each one of these pieces gave you a certain amount of sample time. So you had to work with the confines of being able to work with a 3-second sample, maximum amount of sample time that you can use. So it kind of like forced us to work with smaller bits of pieces of sound as opposed to working with a whole chunk. If you're working with a loop, for example, and you want to do a loop that's run 8 bars, for example, that might take up 10 to 15 seconds worth of time. We didn't have that luxury. So thus, we had to invent ways of stretching out what we needed to do by taking bits of samples and butting them up together and creating kind of like this montage or collage, if you would, of sonic energy. And basically, those are some of the things that we had to do in order to make the records back then. Filtering and things of that nature. We had to invent. We had to invent the characteristics of sub-bass, because sub-bass was something that wasn't had because nobody had sub-bass speakers. So, a lot of these techniques, whether it be, looping, chopping, crossfading samples and blending samples together, all that stuff that we were doing, in our early career, that now you have software that pretty much does a lot of those things for you. You have a preset that you can put onto your sound and pretty much get a lot of the things that we had to kind of like develop by trial and error and experimentation. I had to create what I had as assistants, so to speak. And my assistants was the Bomb Squad, and the Bomb Squad was Eric Sadler and Keith Shocklee, and then also Chuck D was a member as well. And then we would also bring in DJs such as Terminator X, would do some scratching for us. DJ Johnny Juice would do some scratching for us as well. So we would have, so I had this kind of like facility of hands, if you would, that could help do and manage and manipulate the things that I need to manipulate so that I can get the job done a lot faster. I remember when we was doing, back in the days, we was doing Louder Than a Bomb, for example, and we needed to make a mute of all of like about 10 tracks, needed to all mute at once. And we didn't have any automation on our board. So thus we had to have like 8 people all come in, and everybody had like two tracks each, and we all had to synchronize our mute at the right point, because this thing is now being recorded to tape real time. So we didn't have the luxury of like, okay, we could make this mute, listen back and fix it if we didn't like it. So we had to listen to the song come down, and then as it gets to a certain point, everybody has to go like, okay, 1, 2, 3, and everybody had to be on sync. And then you got a release on in sync. So that, those are the kinds of dynamics that we had to do back in the days as vis-a-vis to what you can do today. And today, now that thing I can mute 30 tracks at once. And if I don't like them, I can have them synchronized and doing it in some sort of synchronized rhythm. So there's a lot of different parameters that I have available to me today that I didn't have when we was first starting. Today, you can cut all that out. You don't need to have DJs anymore to do scratching, because you can do scratching yourself now, and you can record that. You can pretty much have musicians that can come in. You don't need to have musicians come in, because now you could play for 2 bars or a bar, and then you can manipulate that and stretch that out for 8 bars or 16 bars or however you mean. So now the workflow has been condensed down to one person can be a one-man band. You can go to YouTube and now record from YouTube. You can have a file that a friend emailed you, and then you can work strictly within the computer. You can take that file, edit it up, take those edited pieces, put it into a sampler, replay it back, put it into a sequencing software. Now put that on beat. All right. Now you can bring in a vocalist and have a vocalist put something on top of it. Now you've taken something that was already inside the computer and just added an external vocal into it, and now this whole thing can be manipulated within the computer realm. And you could do that with guitars, you could do that with drums, you could do that with bass. You have now MIDI bass, you have MIDI drums, you have MIDI keyboards, you have MIDI violins. You have all these different pieces now that can now augment itself inside the computer. And now you can manipulate the sounds from these particular instruments inside the computer. So you're taking the analog world, bringing it inside the computer world, turning it from an analog to a digital. Then now you're taking the digital and you're manipulating that even further. So thus we've developed this entire remix, mashup society that we have that's coming right now. And what's happening is that anything goes. For example, I could send you half of my completed track, then you could listen to my track and add something to it, and you could send it off to somebody else, and somebody else they can listen to it, and they could add some piece, and they could send it to somebody else, and then by the time it gets back to me, it's a totally different piece of work that I could just sit there and go, okay, I love it. I'm going to take this and mess it up and do something different with it. Now we're talking about, being able to take the collaborative process to an entirely new level that we've never been able to do it before, which is, now instead of having to be physically in the same space, now each person can work from their own workspace, whether you be in London, whether you're in Sweden, whether you're in Holland or New York or LA or Atlanta, it doesn't matter, or Brazil or Cuba or Canada. Now we can all work together on one particular project. I think that is a fantastic thing that anybody can make the record today. Anybody who buys a Mac computer, you get GarageBand. So thus, you get the soccer mom, so to speak, it now can make a beat while she's waiting for her son to play soccer. Okay, so those dynamics, to me, makes it better for the entire industry as a whole, because now you're gonna get innovation that's going to happen at all kinds of levels that can come from anybody. I think that one of the things that held the music business in check, so to speak, back in the days, was the fact that there was limited access. So you get a lot of great musicians and a lot of great singers and a lot of great arrangers and never get a chance to fulfill their destiny because they cannot have access to the channels, so to speak. But now we have the internet. We have ways of distributing our talent, or so to speak, or ways of putting our impressions into the public. You know, and that's a great thing, because now anybody could be a publisher, so to speak. Anybody could be a producer. Anybody can create. And we're talking about media 360. We're talking about films. We're talking about, you know, books. We're talking about, you know, as well as records. I think that one of the problems that we had before in the past, and why we've gotten to this level, is because everything started to become predictable. You start to understand that you're starting to look at the success of a certain artist, and you can almost pick them. You can say, okay, he's going to be successful. This guy's going to be successful. And that's because they had the tools in which to promote them. You know, so in other words, they had a machine behind them that was pretty much pushing the button and getting them to all the hot spots, to all the different outlets, to all the radio stations, to all the video stations, and they can put those videos in high rotation and all that other stuff. Well, now this thing is all unpredictable, because now, you know, greatness could come from anywhere. You know, and somebody could take your greatness and flip it in many different ways. So now you have to sit there and say, well, who's the originator of this particular idea?